What's up, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Shooting the Shift. I am Kristin Johnston, and I'm here with my good friend
Nicole Magic.
And today, clearly, we're doing a Zoom, so we're not in person. So it's a little bit different. But we figured we would start out by pulling an intention card. And I've got one of my favorite decks, and Nicole has one of her favorite decks. And we're just going to use that to kind of lead us into a conversation for a new consciousness. So I'm actually pulling from the Star Seed Oracle. It's one of my favorites. You can't really see it because it's going to come in and out. But Nicole, what deck are you using?
Well, I'm actually I have 3 decks out here, and I'm actually being drawn to these universe letters,
Ooh,
which are really cool because they're very motivational and inspirational. So I think that will be a good complement to Oracle deck that you have.
awesome. All right. Nicole and I were just chatting before filming about how sometimes pulling an intention card can kind of just center and focus, especially when the mind gets kind of chaotic and it's just sort of scattered. Sometimes just sitting down with a card deck and shuffling it and clearing your mind and pulling a single card has this way of like just refocusing the energy. And so that's kind of what I use it for.
Yeah, I like that because, when we were talking earlier, it was there's so many topics to talk about, and how are we going to pick which one, because we could just go off all day. And it was, well, why don't we just pull from a deck and have it focus our attention somewhere and just go off on that.
And
So
just
here
roll
we
with
are.
it. All right, so I got the card Star Brothers. Horus energy, protection, loyalty, safety, and trust. And so I'm going to use a little guidebook and see what more there is to that one.
I love it because I pulled mine, and it is, what are you waiting for?
Ooh,
Which goes right along with that, because if there's some trust and things like that in there as a center of focus, many times we procrastinate because we're not trusting in ourselves and the decisions that we have the ability to make.
I think that's almost always the issue is like that, exactly like that lack of trust, lack of belief, that keeps people kind of like stuck in that same limited kind of like self-protected energies. But if we can develop confidence and trust and believe in ourselves and then have other people in our life reinforce that belief, we can go on these kind of like cool adventures in life where we're taking risks and we're willing to do new things and we're not so guarded, I guess. And it's kind of funny because I think that's what this card actually is alluding to. It says you're more protected than you can imagine. It's safe to open the back of your heart. You're being called to be open to receiving a new level of support now from those in your life and from the benevolent beings that you're connected with. Through ancestral patterning, current life traumas, and past life karmic impressions, many of us have become mistrustful and suspicious of loyalty, and we have blocks when it comes to receiving support. We've learned that we need to go at life alone, that it's not safe to let our guard down and open our heart, and that the world isn't a friendly place. The Star Brothers want you to have a new experience of life on Earth. They want you to feel deeply secure and safe, even if you're going through a difficult time. They want you to hand over your fears to them, to see them as opportunities to let in more love. They're guiding you to stay open to receiving a greater level of support than you can ever imagine, both in this world and beyond. So cool.
So cool, because that actually touches on all of those 3 things that I talk about, where the 3 things that everyone needs to feel fulfilled in their life. If it's all in alignment, you don't have the scarcity mode and all these insecurities and things. One is safety and security. So that was mentioned in there, not feeling safe.
Mm.
Um, the other thing was the acceptance. If the world is not a, safe place, then you don't belong. You don't trust other people. And if you're not trusting in other people, you're not trusting in yourself. So that empowerment aspect is not being fulfilled either. So it kind of, and these things dovetail and they play on each other all the time. When it comes to trusting the self, it's about the empowerment and trusting your own intuition.
And that's something that I think has to be consistently developed, because when we're young, we learn to boundary up, you know, and then when you know, we're an adult, we're going through this awakening and we really want to develop these connections and this sense of safety and feel empowered, we kind of have to go back through a lot of the stuff that caused us to boundary up when we were younger. You know, those patterns of energy still kind of play themselves out in our lives. And we had a little get together over the weekend, and we were talking about this, about how most people, if we live in fear, or if we live in stress, even just stressful thoughts can cause our energy to become locked on in on the body. So we automatically feel the need to defend ourselves. Like there's this fear energy that's like, I need to defend and protect myself against this person. And we create this separation and this distance between us and them. What you got there?
Solar plexus.
Yes, exactly. Like that self, right? That ego self that feels like, oh, I need to protect myself from this person, and this is a threat. And so then all of a sudden, if someone has, say someone has like an issue or something comes up for them, they feel offended, we have to be able to develop a new way of addressing those things without needing to defend and protect ourselves against them and create all this chaos in the world. It's like, can we seek to understand another? And that actually leads us into what we were just talking about earlier too, like creating space for both parts of us, the part that, yes, can feel offended, but also creating the space for healing and connection, and not nullifying or vilifying one side of it, but really creating space for both, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And, uh, there was something that I was going to bring up about, shoot, I lost it.
So you got the solar plexus card, and what was the other card was,
What are you waiting for?
what are you waiting for?
So actually, the solar plexus, when it comes to, oh, I know what I was going to say. So let me just go with the solar plexus piece. Is that's your power center, and that is also connected to your third eye directly. Because if you're not confident in yourself and your abilities, and then you're not going to trust your intuition, you're not going to trust yourself to make the right decisions, and therefore, how many people, this goes back to what I was going to bring up earlier, was trust no one. And that also includes yourself. Were you raised in that sense of trust no one?
Yeah, the world is an unfriendly place, right? People aren't to be trusted. And then you spend your whole life building up these energetic barriers between you and other people, and then we wonder like why our relationships suffer, or why we can't seem to like get along with people. There's a fine line that's walked between, yes, protecting self, and we talked about it earlier, setting healthy boundaries, right? So it's also, another word for it is individuating, like becoming an individual and having this ground and this sense of confidence and self-embodiment, but also merging with others and having intimacy and learn. Really, it's like a energy is an unspoken language that we really need to reconnect to if we're gonna shift into a higher dimension of consciousness as a species of human beings. It doesn't mean, and this is another question and I don't have any answers to it, but it's just my mind likes to think about it sometimes, is this shift in consciousness. Do you think it's a shift into a utopia, or do you think it's just a shift into a higher degree of harmony as humans? So just to kind of make it a succinct question, do we transcend our humanity itself and become something greater than humans, or do we become like more harmonious beings as we already are? Does that make sense?
That makes total sense. And I I guess we don't know for sure, right? Because we don't know what truth actually is, or what the future truly holds. We talked about previously all the multiverses, how many dimensions there are, and how many infinite possibilities there are of what's happening here and on other planes. But taking this reality, right, and what happens in ascension and transcending where we are currently, I feel like it's stepwise fashions. So it may just be creating more harmony. In order to increase your own vibration, you create more harmony within your own self, right? So when that propagates out to other people, as more people create more harmony and understanding amongst the masses, we transcend as that species. And maybe one day it gets to that point where we transcend the physical body itself, because that's the way that it goes. But we've got to get through, like, think of a piano scale,
Mm.
right? You got to go through several scales before you get to the end of that piano. And what
That's
does
a
that mean?
Yeah, that's a beautiful way of actually of putting it, because there was a time when I would say when I was sort of like newly awakened that I thought this is going to be an epic shift in consciousness and people are just almost like we're going to just jump from like the bottom step to the top step, and I was really like thought that it would be this total utopian reality. And it doesn't mean that I still don't believe that that's a potential, but now I'm seeing it from a more individuated, or I would say what people call realistic perspective of sort of like the like you said with the piano, or the steps. Like there's steps that we can take. And I think that like some of the things that we were talking about earlier too, like learning how to set healthy boundaries between self and other, how to individuate, right? These are like critical to the shift in consciousness. And what I find to be the most fascinating is when people have a spiritual awakening or they identify as really spiritual beings, the emphasis is always on like limitless possibility and the quantum field and the interconnection of all things. And I believe that that is a fundamental truth. But in order to actually anchor that truth down onto our planet, which is very solid, we have to develop ourselves as individuals. And it's really just like this beautiful thing. And it's almost I can't think of like the perfect word for it, but in order to get to the thing that we want, which is unity consciousness, we actually have to become solid as individuals first. And I guess like for me, that's kind of like a new way of looking at it, because I never really perceived it that way. So that's a new shift that's kind of been percolating
Yeah.
lately, like the strength in the individual to actually build the collective net.
Yeah, because as within, so without, right? As above, so below, as within, so without. And and that's the whole premise of know yourself. If you know yourself at a deep level, you have a much greater understanding of everyone else, and there is no judgment. And that's really the way in which you get to the point of judgment not having an effect on you, is by having no judgment. And in order to have no judgment on others, you have to understand yourself at a very deep level. So it's just this perpetuation of like a circle that it doesn't end.
And to be able to see the mirror effect too, right? Like if we
Yes.
there's a like that, saying, if you're pointing one finger at someone else, you've got three more pointing back at you. So being able to use judgment as an opportunity to discover discernment. So because I think as human beings, like judgment is almost like part of our nature. But it doesn't have to be a negative judgment. It could be like a discernment of oh, do I actually like that, or why do I feel offended by that, or what, instead of making it about the other person, how do we use that to go deeper into self-discovery?
Ah, that's a great question, because it all comes down to your beliefs. So if you have negative limiting beliefs, you will have that I feel offended for that. And why? what is it that, what are your thoughts and what are you feeling? Are you feeling, I don't know, um, it's all on me. Let's take that. It's all on me. That's victim mentality coming from somebody who's got to do it all. All the weight is on my shoulders, right? And it's too much responsibility. You're taking on and assuming too much responsibility.
Yeah,
And
that's
you're enabling the people around you to just sit back while you take care of everything because you're just going to do it because that's who you are and that's what you do. And
and
what
that
is that belief? Sorry, like I keep cutting you off,
no,
but
no, no, that's perfect.
what is that belief that's in there that you have to do everything? If I want it done right, I have to do it myself. Is that where it comes from? Maybe. If it's nobody else is going to do it unless I do it, well, that's your part of enabling that happening because you're doing it instead of holding other people responsible. So there's so many things that can come from that, and just honing in on what is it for you? Why are you doing it? Why are you creating that? Other people have their own angles of why they're creating that situation too, but you've also got to be committed to your responsibility and what your role is and what people are showing you about you.
Mm. Life is a mirror. Life is a sacred mirror, and we need these relationships in order to come into self-discovery, right? Like, so if you are like the person you were explaining, the overdoer, the people pleaser, the one who takes on too much, if that's you, like not you personally, but if that's whoever's listening, like if that's the type of personality, then it's like really using those relationships. How would that person even come to know their own tendencies if there wasn't also overtakers in the world, right?
Yeah.
So like you need the overgiver actually needs the overtaker in order to understand a healthy boundary, and the overtaker needs someone who has a healthy boundary to understand where they might be over asking. So like
Yes.
we need so this is like a beautiful example of how relationship, how getting into the body, getting into your life, into your relationships, that's actually the ascension. Like, even though the spiritualist or the spiritual mask might make it all about, no, I've got to sit in meditation for 2 hours every day, I've got to dissociate from reality to discover enlightenment. No, you got to get into your life, into your body, into your beliefs, into your patterns. And as you can do that, then you create more harmony and order naturally. So, like the person you were explaining, when the people pleaser is able to actually establish a healthy boundary, and then the person who had been over asking of that person learns their healthy boundary, that shift in consciousness creates a whole new dynamic of relationship that then has this ripple effect. Like,
Yeah.
it's so powerful. I find this work to be, this coming into self-awareness, the most impactful work for creating a new earth. It's not always about the like the mystical stuff, even though that's like I think probably both of our favorite thing to talk about. But sometimes it's really actually the practical stuff that creates the greatest shift in consciousness.
Yeah. And I call that whole process of what you were just talking about like triple R, right? It's getting real, it's getting raw, and realigning because you got to get real with yourself. And in order to get real with yourself, you got to strip down and get raw. Like it hurts. It's abrasive sometimes, like sandpaper on the skin. And so you got to get raw. And then once you do, and having that acceptance, it's realign because it's a self-discovery, it's understanding, and it's going deeper and allowing yourself to rise up over all of that. Because who do these people attract, right? The people pleaser will attract the person who, well, I can't do it. Why? I don't know how. Well, I do, so I'll just take care of it. right? So there's that person, and then we perpetuate this instead of, well, let me show you, let me empower you and enable, instead of, um, like give you ability to do, right, and teach you how to do something. Even if you get it wrong the first however many times, it's okay, because practice makes perfect. Or if it's an more elaborate or complicated process, well, it takes steps. Maybe it's, well, why don't you do this step first? Start here until you feel comfortable with that step, and I'll take over. Let me show you how to get there. And then you can take turns, whatever that is. But you're going to attract that person that you can't do it. And then your impatience kicks in because, well, if you want it done right, you got to do it yourself.
And how much of this do you think comes from our early childhood programming? Like
Oh,
all of it, right?
so much, because you can also take the control freak, right? There's a piece of this. So there's all these victim, villain, hero modes that we as humans will tend to go navigate through very quickly. You can be a victim 1 second, the villain the next second, hero mode the other second. If you're taking it all on, I'm the big hero, I'm taking care of everything. You know, when we go into like that control freak, it's, ooh, you got to do it my way. There's only one way, it's my way,
Hmm.
right? And who do those people attract? The people that are just going to be like, okay,
Hmm.
okay.
And it's all energy.
It is. It's
It,
all energy.
and it's all, there's this fantastic book. It's called Getting the Love You Want by Harville Hendrix. And he talks about the what we're talking about in terms of energy, he talks about in terms of relationship and basically coming into consciousness, like healing the inner child, how these patterns get downloaded into us when we're younger, and then we attract, he calls it, he says we attract romantic relationship, but I would actually broaden it and say we attract all relationship, friendships, children,
It's,
all of these players in the game of life. We draw them to us by virtue of an invisible force that's actually been programmed into us since early childhood, and we do it so we can come into consciousness. This is what Joseph Campbell calls the hero's journey, the journey of life, of coming into, you know self-actualized consciousness. And we have to become willing of how these patterns play out and ask that question: who am I? Am I the overgiver? Am I the overtaker? Am I the space shot? Like, am I the rigid achiever? Like, who am, what's my energy pattern, and how do I bring it into self-awareness to live within more harmony? When am I the victim? When am I the villain? When am I the hero?
and it flips so quickly. And that's the thing, is you can be on one end of the spectrum 1 second and on the complete opposite the other. So who's to say that you're not the overgiver in some instances and the overtaker in others? Because you're going to get burnt out on one end or the other, and flip and flip and flip.
It's where energy management comes in, like just being aware of how do I manage my energy. And one beautiful thing too is that different people will call out different parts of you. Like
Yeah.
different relationships will bring out. So instead of like, it's so easy for us to just always project. Like if there's discomfort or even if there's love, we a lot of times we project it onto the other person, and
Right.
not like, oh, that person brings out this quality within me. And if it's a good quality, then we tend to say, oh, this is good, I like this relationship. But if it's a bad quality, then we'll blame the other person instead of recognizing it's,
Oh,
you know what I mean?
you're making my mind like go in all these spaces, because it's like, okay, even with that, let's say you have somebody who's really generous in certain instances. Like, I have known people, right, in these instances where they're super generous at some part in some situations, kindest, most generous person. And then all of a sudden, in other instances, they're like very miserly and like, no, right? They want to go into hoarder mode, like, no, or scarcity mode. And and it's crazy, because if you think about it, at what point is that being generous actually good? Probably not. Somewhere in the middle is going to be more consistent for that person. It's the pendulum swing, like we've talked about before. Is if
Exactly.
you're always like bipolar, where swinging over here like super generous, and then oh now over here I gotta wrap things up. No, you can't. You don't. That doesn't belong to you, or whatever are the cases. It's still like the pendulum swing instead of being a middle road, and it's not good on either end, right? Somewhere in the middle would be more consistent, more in that space. But when you're dealing with that pendulum swing, why is that? It's also related to so many of my clients have this going on where it's feast or famine, right?
Mm.
So when it comes to money, we were just talking about relationships, right? It's more relationships where you're generous or kind or not at all. And but if we take that and plug that in with money, it's feast or famine. When things are going well and the money's coming in, everything is, woo, that's great. And then all of a sudden, now I can rest. And then I rest to a point where, oh, shoot, now I'm doing the doggy paddle, I'm trying to stay afloat, and there's so much going on and all these things. And now I have to make the money. And it gets to the point where now you're hitting that pain level that ignites the fire to make you move, to do the hustle, to make the money, to bring it in, to take the steps that make the money, to bring it in. And now you're up here and oh, the money's coming in. And okay, great. We've got those things paid off. And now I can relax a little bit. And we start the cycle all over again instead of being in the middle, being consistent and finding the behavior that is going to bring that consistency so you're not burning out so tired because of all the hustle that paid off the bills and then going right back into it because it's exhausting.
I think being human, it's like that we were talking about that earlier. It is, you're right. It can be exhausting when you're chasing the pendulum. You're constantly running after, oh, this feels good, let me do this. And then, oh, no, this feels bad, let me run from this. And so yeah, that's why I really enjoy that Buddhist perspective on like finding the middle path and acknowledging that as long as we're human, we're going to experience the extremes of polarity. But if we're mindful humans, we don't have to be so swept away by the tide of our own humanity. But I love the idea of creating neutrality, like finding a place that is, like you said, like that middle spot, that balance of sort of like the steady, consistent, finding that almost like an equilibrium within the bipolarness that can be just life on this planet, like, and clearly we see this massive shift in consciousness happening. We wouldn't be having these conversations if it wasn't. There are people who are awakening to this level of self-understanding. But what I've found is, since it's become trendy to be awake and to carry crystals and to do all the spiritual things, a lot of times I see this projection of spirituality almost as though it's an idealized state, rather a continuous, steady awareness, like you had just said. Like, it's this idealized, oh, in order to be spiritual, then I have to be positive all the time. I have to be, you know, like I have to be a certain way, when really spirituality is it's a way of living within your life, within the human condition. It's not an idealized state, right? We can't get to enlightenment. We become enlightened through moments of bringing our own consciousness into awareness, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I love these conversations, Nicole.
Me too. We could go
I,
on all day.
we could, and I know we have to wrap it up. But I hope for the people who listen, what I'm curious because whenever Nicole and I have these conversations, my mind starts going like all of a sudden, like I know that I'll be sort of like ruminating on some of these concepts that we brought up throughout the day. I'm curious for the people listening, what do these conversations bring up within you? Do they make you self-aware? Do they make you say, oh yeah, I do that sometimes? Like let us know, reach out to us, whether it's in the comments or through private messages. I'm curious if these conversations help or if they expand your mind or anything like that.
Yeah, we want to know because we're here for you anyway.
Yeah,
Otherwise, we would just have these conversations and keep them to ourselves.
exactly. Because we're going to be shooting the shift no matter what. So yeah, um, let us know, and also let us know what kind of shifting, what shifts are, giving you not troubles, but where are your resistances to the shift, and what are some of the things you might want us to cover that can help. I know one thing that comes up a lot too is denial of like the more spiritual, the more human parts of ourselves during a spiritual awakening, denying anger, right? So like kind of negating parts of it. What are the parts of being human that you find the most challenging? That's actually my question for our audience. What are the parts of the human experience that you struggle with the most? Let us know in the comments, and we'll see you next week.
Yes. Bye, everyone.